All right, ever get that feeling? Like you walk into a room, maybe it's a place you've never been, or you're talking to someone new, and suddenly, boom, it hits you. That weird sensation, like you've done this exact thing before. That's what we're talking about today, folks. Deja vu.
Yeah, that strange sense of familiarity, it's incredibly common, right? But we're going way deeper than just, oh, I think I've been here before. We're going to dig into the science, and trust me, it gets pretty wild. We've got psychology, neuroscience, even some pretty out there theories.
It's going to be quite a ride. We've got all sorts of sources for this deep dive, and our mission today is to connect the dots, weave together all these different perspectives to try and make sense of this really weird experience we call deja vu.
By the end, you might just look at your own brain differently, It really makes you question how we perceive reality, how our memories work.
Exactly.
And while you're at it, please like, subscribe, and share.
So let's start with the basics. What is deja vu? I mean, how do we even define this thing?
Well, there are a lot of definitions out there, and it's interesting how they've evolved over time. Like way back in the 1800s, this guy, Leben, he described it as the feeling that a situation had already existed at some former time. Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, like a simple sense of having been there before.
Right. Then you jump ahead to the early 1900s, and Drever calls it an illusion of recognition. So now it's not just that you've been there, but that you're recognizing it, even though you know you haven't.
An illusion. That's interesting. It starts to get at that feeling of, wait, something's not quite right here.
Exactly. And then Ellis in 1911, he really nailed that feeling, calling it the illusion that the event that is at the moment happening to us has happened to us before. It's like that instant, been there, done that feeling, even though you know it's impossible.
And then a few decades later, you have Ferenczi describing it as this inexplicable feeling of familiarity conjured up by something that is met for the first time. It's like you're meeting a stranger, but somehow they feel incredibly familiar, like you've known them forever.
It's almost like your brain is playing tricks on you. And this theme of illusion keeps popping up. Harriman, in the 1940s, defined it as the illusion of having previously seen something that actually has never been encountered before.
Yeah, and some of the descriptions from these early thinkers are really interesting, like Hearn in the early 1900s talking about a strange air of familiarity, about the streets of a foreign town or the forms of a foreign landscape. It's that feeling of recognition in a completely new environment.
You really get a sense of how sudden and intense the experience can be in Heyman's 1904 definition. He called it a state with sudden onset and disappearance, where you feel like you've lived the present moment on some occasion in a distant past in precisely the same manner.
So it's not just a vague sense of familiarity. It's this very specific, vivid feeling of having experienced this exact moment before, down to the smallest details.
Right, and that's where Dr. Akira O'Connor's perspective adds another layer to this. He argues that déjà vu isn't just the feeling of familiarity, it's also the awareness that this feeling is wrong.
Okay, so you're not only experiencing it, but you're also kind of stepping back and going, hold on, my brain is messing with me right now.
Exactly. It's that metacognitive aspect, thinking about your own thinking. And the BBC Science Focus article points out that this means déjà vu might not be a memory malfunction at all.
Oh, interesting. So it's not that your memory is broken, but that it's actually doing something more complex.
Yeah, like maybe it's a sign that your brain's monitoring systems are working, flagging this feeling of familiarity that doesn't have a real source.
Huh. That's pretty mind-blowing. So instead of being a glitch, it could be a sign that your brain is functioning properly.
Exactly. It reframes the whole phenomenon. Now, thinking about the scientific study of déjà vu, it hasn't always been taken seriously, has it?
Not really, no. I mean, it's such a subjective, internal experience.
Right. And our source, the déjà vu experience, it talks about how this has been a real struggle for researchers. It's been recognized since the 1800s, but it almost got completely ignored by the behaviorist movement in psychology.
Oh, right. Behaviorism.
Yeah.
Everything had to be observable, measurable, no room for feelings or internal experiences.
Exactly. That put a huge roadblock in the way of understanding something like déjà vu. And then on top of that, you had all these more unconventional interpretations popping up, like parapsychological and psychodynamic theories.
Yeah, linking it to psychic phenomena, past lives, repressed memories.
It made déjà vu a bit of a hot potato in the scientific community. Plus, As the book highlights, there was a very practical problem. How do you study something that doesn't have a clear, identifiable trigger?
Right. You can't exactly just tell people in a lab, okay, now have some déjà vu.
Nope. And the book points out that a lot of the early research on déjà vu ended up in journals and books that weren't really part of the mainstream scientific world. So it was kind of stuck in this obscure corner of psychology for a long time.
And it's telling that even a big name in memory research like Roediger, he's expressed disappointment about how little progress has been made in understanding things like déjà vu. It shows just how tricky this phenomenon is to study.
It really does. So now let's talk about how common déjà vu actually is. Anecdotally, it seems like everyone's experienced it at some point.
Right. But what do the studies actually say?
Well, research suggests it's not quite universal, but it's pretty darn close. Estimates say about 2/3 of people report having experienced it.
That's still a huge portion of the population.
Yeah.
But the book mentions that these estimates can vary depending on how you ask the question.
Exactly. Like if you ask about déjà vu in a survey that also includes questions about paranormal stuff, like ESP or alien abductions, people might be more likely to interpret their experiences in that light.
So the context can influence how people think about their own experiences.
Right. It's fascinating how subtle things like that can affect the results.
And even those big surveys like the General Social Survey, they tend to put the déjà vu question next to ones about ghosts and out-of-body experiences.
Yeah, it's like there's this underlying assumption that déjà vu is somehow connected to the paranormal, even in these big research projects.
So when we talk about people experiencing déjà vu, are we talking about like constant episodes? Or is it more of a fleeting thing?
It's definitely more fleeting. Most people who experience déjà vu say it happens occasionally, not all the time.
Makes sense. I mean, can you imagine feeling like you're reliving every moment? Go crazy.
Right. And even trying to remember how often you've had déjà vu is tricky. It's such a quick, unexpected thing. It's not like you're keeping a diary of your déjà vu episodes.
True. So let's talk about age, because that seems to play a big role.
Yeah, one of the most consistent findings is this negative correlation between age and déjà vu, meaning the older you get, the less likely you are to experience it.
Makes sense. You've had more experiences, so maybe things just seem less novel as you age.
Yeah, that could be part of it. And the research backs this up. Like Harper found that around 80% of young adults had experienced déjà vu, but that dropped to 60% for those over 25.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. And the Adachi study, they found a correlation of negative 0.38. That's a pretty strong link between age and déjà vu.
It is, but there are a couple of exceptions to this trend that are interesting.
Oh, like what?
Well, teenagers actually report lower rates of déjà vu than people in their early 20s.
Really? That's surprising. You'd think the opposite would be true, right? They're experiencing so much for the first time.
You'd think so. But the book suggests that this might be because teenagers haven't fully developed their metacognitive awareness yet. Remember, that's the ability to think about your own thinking, to recognize that the feeling of familiarity is wrong.
So they might have the feeling, but they don't necessarily label it as déjà vu.
Exactly. And then the other interesting thing is that the overall lifetime incidence of déjà vu is said to be decreasing across generations.
So fewer people are experiencing it over time. That's unexpected.
Yeah, and the book speculates that this could be because of growing cultural awareness. Maybe older generations didn't have the same language or understanding to recognize and report these experiences.
Interesting. So it might not be that fewer people are having it, but that they're less likely to identify it as déjà vu.
Exactly. It's all about how we frame and interpret our own experiences.
So is age the only thing linked to déjà vu? Or are there other factors?
Oh, there are definitely other factors. Education and income seem to be positively correlated with experiencing déjà vu, while socioeconomic class has a negative correlation.
So people with more education and higher income are more likely to report déjà vu.
But that's what the research suggests, yeah.
Interesting. What about things like travel or personality?
Well, people who travel tend to report more déjà vu than those who don't. But it's not about how much you travel, just whether you do or not.
So just the act of traveling, of experiencing new places, might make you more susceptible. That's fascinating.
It is. And when it comes to personality, there are some really intriguing findings. People who identify as politically liberal report more déjà vu than those who identify as conservative.
Wow. Even political leanings seem to play a role.
Yeah, and people with fundamentalist religious beliefs tend to report less déjà vu. Also, there's a positive link with dream recall. So if you remember your dreams often, you're more likely to experience déjà vu too.
That makes sense. Dreams and déjà vu, they both have that surreal, is this real kind of feeling.
Right. And interestingly, there doesn't seem to be any significant connection to gender or race.
So it really is this complex mix of factors that contributes to whether someone experiences déjà vu and how often.
It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Okay, so we've talked about who experiences it, but what does it actually feel like to have déjà vu? I mean, beyond that general sense of familiarity, what are the common elements or triggers?
That's a great question, and surprisingly, it's an area where research has been a bit lacking.
Really? You'd think they'd figure that out by now.
You'd think so, right? But as the book points out, a lot of studies haven't really dug into the nature of the experience itself. They focus more on, like, how often it happens or who experiences it.
Huh, that's interesting. So what do we know about the actual feeling of déjà vu?
Well, there's this study from 1994 by Brown and his colleagues where they surveyed a bunch of young adults about their experiences. They found that the most common triggers were overall situations, specific sites, and conversations.
So it's often the context, the visuals, or the dialogue that sparks that feeling of familiarity. What about other senses, like smell or sound?
They were reported less often, but they could definitely play a role too. And what's interesting is that when they asked people to describe their most recent déjà vu experience, sights were the most common trigger.
So even though people might think their typical déjà vu is triggered by a certain thing, the most vivid memory they have might be linked to something different.
Exactly. It shows how tricky it can be to rely on memory, especially when it comes to something as fleeting and subjective as déjà vu.
Okay, let's talk about dreams now. A lot of people connect dreams to déjà vu. Or you've ever heard people say, it felt just like a dream.
All the time. It's a very common association. And the book outlines 3 main ways that dreams can be linked to déjà vu.
Oh, cool. What are they?
Well, first, sometimes déjà vu feels like you're directly reliving something from a dream rather than from real life.
Like you're literally replaying a scene from a dream you had.
Right. And Brown's study found that while more people thought their déjà vu came from a real event, a lot of them said it could have been either a dream or reality.
Yeah, it makes sense. Dreams can be so vivid and strange
Yeah.
that they could easily blend with our waking experiences.
Exactly. And that dreamlike quality is definitely part of what makes déjà vu so fascinating and mysterious.
So what's the second connection between dreams and déjà vu?
This one's about how specific elements from a dream, even one you might have forgotten, can trigger déjà vu when you encounter them in real life.
Ah, like a forgotten dream fragment suddenly finding its match in the real world. That's so cool.
Right. It's like your brain is making these subconscious connections between your dream world and your waking life.
And the third connection. This one's got to be good.
This one's pretty wild. Some people report having déjà vu within a dream.
Whoa, déjà vu inception. That's like next level weirdness.
It is. It's like your brain is playing this game of, have I been here before within a dream, which is already a kind of altered reality.
So are researchers looking into these connections between dreams and déjà vu?
They are. They're studying how dream frequency and vividness might relate to déjà vu, and they're also looking at related things like daydreaming and childhood fantasies.
It's all about understanding the landscape of our internal mental world, right? How our imagination and memories interact.
Exactly. Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about some of the psychological explanations for déjà vu.
All right, so we're moving away from dreams and into the realm of, like, therapy and the subconscious.
Sort of. The psychodynamic perspective, which was one of the earliest attempts to explain déjà vu, focuses on unconscious processes and conflicts.
Oh, so we're talking Freud and all that.
Yeah, Freud definitely had his own take on it. He thought déjà vu was linked to the memory of an unconscious fantasy.
So that feeling of, I've been here before, could actually be a subconscious desire or a scenario you've played out in your head without realizing it.
Exactly. It's like a repressed thought or impulse trying to break through into consciousness.
That's pretty deep. What are some of the other psychodynamic ideas?
Well, one idea is that déjà vu could be a kind of ego defense mechanism. Like, your ego is trying to make a new or threatening situation feel familiar so you don't freak out.
Ah, so it's a way of protecting yourself from anxiety.
Yeah. And then there's the repressed memory idea. Like, maybe that feeling of familiarity is actually a buried memory trying to resurface.
Huh, like a flashback, but you can't quite place it.
Exactly. And there are other explanations too, like interpsychic conflict, where different parts of your personality are clashing, or wish fulfillment, where you're subconsciously trying to make a desire come true.
So, psychodynamically speaking, déjà vu is all about those hidden parts of ourselves trying to communicate with our conscious mind.
Exactly. It's about uncovering the deeper meaning behind these seemingly random experiences.
Okay. So what about the more cognitive explanations? What do they say about déjà vu?
Well, the dual process explanations are really interesting. They basically say that déjà vu happens when two cognitive processes, usually involved in memory and recognition, get out of sync.
Dual process. So like two parts of my brain are working against each other.
Not exactly against each other, but more like they're not communicating properly.
Okay, I think I get it. So what are some of the specific dual process theories?
One is called spontaneous activation, where you get this feeling of familiarity without actually retrieving a specific memory.
So you know something feels familiar, but you can't pinpoint why.
Exactly. Then there's retrieval and familiarity, where you retrieve a memory, but it lacks context. Like you know it's familiar, but you can't remember when or where you encountered it before.
Huh, so your brain is like, I know this, but I don't know how I know this.
Exactly. And that disconnect can create that eerie sense of déjà vu.
What are some of the other theories?
Well, there's retrieval and temporal tags, which focuses on how our brains tag memories with a time and place. Maybe there's a glitch in that tagging system, so a memory feels like it's happening right now, even though it's from the past.
Ah, so it's like your brain is misfiling a memory.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's the merged processes idea, where cognitive processes that usually happen separately, like perception and memory, might briefly overlap.
So they're stepping on each other's toes, basically.
Yeah, and that creates confusion, that sense of, I've done this before.
Makes sense. What about encoding and retrieval?
Those theories suggest that something goes wrong during the initial encoding of information into memory, which then messes things up when you try to retrieve that memory later.
So like a corrupted file on your computer.
Kind of, yeah. The information gets stored incorrectly, so when you access it, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, and then there's perception and encoding.
That's similar, but it focuses on the initial perception of an event. Maybe there's a glitch in that first moment of taking in information, and that creates this weird sense of familiarity later on.
So it's like your brain is misinterpreting the present because of a problem that happened in the past.
Right. And Carrington, back in 1931, he had this great analogy. He compared it to two soldiers marching in formation. If one soldier pauses for a second, the other one bumps into him.
I like that. It's a simple way to visualize what might be happening in the brain.
Exactly. He thought that if our attention wavers, even for a split second, our memory and perception processes might collide, creating this feeling of déjà vu.
Ah, so distraction or fatigue could contribute to it. What about the idea of a gap between sensation and perception?
That's another interesting one. It basically says that there might be a slight delay between when we sense something, like through our eyes or ears, and when our brain processes that information and makes sense of it.
So like a lag between input and processing.
Yeah, exactly. And usually this happens so fast we don't even notice it. But if there's a slightly longer delay, it could create this weird feeling where the raw sensory input feels like something from the past.
It's like your senses are a split second ahead of your understanding.
Exactly. And this guy Parrish, back in 1897, he described it as an abnormal widening between sensation and perception.
So it's like a temporal glitch in your brain's processing system. That's really wild.
It is. It shows how even tiny disruptions in our cognitive processes can create these really bizarre experiences.
Okay, so let's move on to the neurological explanations now. What does our brain's hardware have to do with déjà vu?
Well, some researchers think it might be caused by these brief, temporary changes in the brain's electrical and chemical signaling.
Like mini brain zaps.
Kinda, yeah. One idea is that small seizures, particularly in the temporal lobe, could be involved.
The temporal lobe, that's the part of the brain that deals with memory,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And this idea comes from the fact that people with temporal lobe epilepsy sometimes report déjà vu as part of their auras, those warning signs they get before a seizure.
So does that mean if you have déjà vu, you might have epilepsy?
No, not at all. It's important to emphasize that. Most people who experience déjà vu don't have epilepsy.
Okay, good to know. So if it's not always seizures, what else could be going on in the brain?
Well, even in people without epilepsy, there could be tiny delays or accelerations in neural transmission speed. Imagine different pathways in the brain carrying the same information, but one pathway is slightly faster or slower than the others.
So you get this kind of echo effect in your brain.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the book mentions a case study where a patient who had seizures and frequent déjà vu was treated with this medication called clonazepam.
And what happened?
Well, the medication stopped her seizures, and her déjà vu experiences decreased significantly and eventually disappeared.
Wow, so the medication somehow fixed both problems.
That's what it seemed like. The researchers thought it might be because the medication increased blood flow to certain areas of the brain, like the temporal and frontal lobe.
So it was like giving those brain regions a boost.
Yeah, potentially. But it's important to note that this was just one case study.
Right, so we can't draw any firm conclusions from it.
Yeah.
But it does suggest a link between brain activity and déjà vu.
It does, and it's fascinating to think that something as simple as blood flow could influence these complex experiences.
Now let's talk about the connection between déjà vu and mental health. Is it true that people with certain mental illnesses are more likely to experience it?
That's a tricky one. It's been hard to get clear answers from people with conditions like schizophrenia, for example.
Why is that?
Well, their thought processes can be disorganized, so it's difficult to get reliable reports from them about their experiences.
Makes sense. So is there a link between schizophrenia and déjà vu?
Some studies have found a higher rate of déjà vu in people with schizophrenia, but others haven't, so the evidence isn't very strong.
Okay, so it's not a clear-cut thing. What about other conditions, like anxiety or mood disorders?
Well, there have been historical links between déjà vu and things like neurotic conditions and mood swings, but these were often based on anecdotal evidence, not rigorous studies.
Right, so not very reliable.
Exactly. And when researchers have done more direct comparisons across different mental health conditions, the results have been mixed.
So the jury's still out on whether there's a strong connection between déjà vu and specific mental illnesses.
Pretty much, yeah. But there is a potential link to depersonalization and derealization, which are these feelings of being detached from yourself or from reality.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. They sound really unsettling.
They can be. And that feeling of derealization, where the world around you feels strange and unfamiliar, it can actually feel quite similar to déjà vu.
Huh. Interesting. So they both involve this sense of the familiar becoming unfamiliar.
Exactly. And the book mentions this researcher, Kinnear Wilson, who classified the auras that some people with epilepsy experience. Type 1 auras involve déjà vu and feelings of familiarity, while type 2 auras involve feelings of strangeness and unreality, like derealization.
So even in epilepsy, you see these two opposite experiences connected to the same brain regions.
Exactly. It suggests that those areas involved in recognition and our sense of reality can be disrupted in different ways, leading to these contrasting experiences.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but we haven't even touched on the more, let's say, creative explanations for déjà vu. What about those paranormal theories?
Ah, yes, the paranormal. Well, as you can imagine, a phenomenon as strange as déjà vu has attracted its fair share of speculation.
Yeah, like past lives, psychic powers, all that stuff.
Exactly. Some people think it's a form of precognition, a glimpse into the future. Others believe it's telepathic communication or even a memory from a past life.
Wow, that's pretty far out there.
It is. Could it be a peek behind the curtains of reality itself?
That's the big question, isn't it?
We're plunging straight into Deja Vu Enigma by Marie Jones and Larry Flaxman. And let me tell you, this book asks some truly mind-bending questions.
Jones and Flaxman, they've woven together this incredible tapestry, cutting-edge science on one hand.
And some seriously out there theories on the other. It's quite the mix.
And they even hint that déjà vu might be a doorway to something. Well, beyond our everyday understanding. What I found so compelling about Deja Vu Enigma is how it just embraces the complexity, you know? But it's still super engaging.
Totally. They don't shy away from the hard data, but they also explore personal stories, those weird mind anomalies that often get pushed to the fringes.
It's ambitious.
Take Tom's story. He's on a bus tour in Athens, Greece.
Okay, Athens, got it.
A place totally foreign to him. He'd never even been outside his home state before.
Wow. So zero prior connection.
Zero. Yet as he's seeing these ancient sites, the Propylaea, the Temple of Athena Nike, he gets this powerful feeling, like he's seen them before, almost like revisiting old haunts.
How is that even possible? No pictures, no documentaries, nothing.
Apparently not. It just throws up these huge questions about memory, experience.
Yeah.
What is that feeling, really?
It really does. And there's another one, John Mims.
Ah, yes, John Mims. He reports experiencing déjà vu fairly regularly, but one instance really stands out from when he was a kid.
Okay.
Visiting Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home, he wanders into some outbuildings in the garden, and even though he'd never seen pictures of these specific buildings, the inside felt instantly totally recognizable. The layout, the materials, even antique tools on the walls.
Whoa. Not just a vague feeling then, like specific details.
Exactly, details he couldn't have consciously known. These stories really drive home how perplexing and intense déjà vu can be.
They really pull you in. Makes you think, maybe déjà vu isn't just, as the book kind of jokes, a little brain fart.
Right. The authors seriously propose maybe it's a fleeting glimpse into another layer of reality.
Like what kind of layer?
Could be anything, really. A parallel universe running alongside ours. A forgotten past life popping up. Maybe even another dimension entirely.
It's like reality is just one channel on a cosmic TV, and déjà vu is a quick flicker to another station. That's a mind bender.
And they connect it to synchronicity, too, which is fascinating.
Ah, synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences, right? Where things seem connected beyond just chance.
Precisely. Both déjà vu and synchronicity might hint at some deeper underlying order, a place where the lines between our minds and the physical world get blurry.
Okay, blurry lines. I like that.
And then they bring up DMT.
Okay, DMT, dimethyltryptamine. Now we're really venturing into some far-out territory.
We certainly are. DMT is a naturally occurring psychedelic. The book explores this really intriguing idea that DMT might be linked to déjà vu through something called state-specific memory.
State-specific memory, what's that?
The theory goes, maybe DMT induces a particular state of consciousness, maybe similar to dreaming, and you can only recall experiences from that state when you're in a similar state again.
So a random flicker of that state, maybe a tiny natural surge in DMT, could trigger a memory from a previous DMT-influenced state, like a dream.
Possibly. Some researchers think DMT levels might rise naturally during dreaming, so déjà vu could be this brief recognition of something you experienced in a dreamlike, maybe DMT-influenced state that you'd otherwise forgotten.
A fleeting memory from a psychedelic dream state. That is definitely thinking outside the box. Wild.
It's a fascinatingly psychedelic possibility for sure.
But Déjà Vu Enigma doesn't stop there. It dives headfirst into the paranormal possibilities.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, ready. What paranormal theories do they explore?
Well, one big one is that déjà vu could actually be a form of precognition.
Precognition, seeing the future.
Like a tiny glimpse. A nanosecond preview of an event that your brain then processes, but misinterprets it as a past memory instead of a future event.
Whoa. So you experience it, then immediately remember experiencing it because you just did experience it a split second early.
Something like that. A glitch in time perception. The book also touches on possible links to psychic abilities like remote viewing, knowing things about distant places.
So maybe déjà vu is like your timeline wobbling for a second, letting you straddle two moments at once. A future event feeling like a mirrored memory.
That's the kind of mind-bending idea they put forward. It really challenges our whole linear view of time.
Absolutely.
Then there are even weirder reports. Time storms, time slips.
Involuntary movement through space and time, associated with weird energy clouds. That sounds wild.
Very wild. Anecdotal accounts, researched by people like Jenny Randles, suggest maybe glitches in the space-time continuum, but highly speculative, subjective evidence.
Okay, back to something maybe more attainable. Lucid dreaming. Knowing you're dreaming while dreaming.
Exactly, and maybe controlling it. Moving beyond just symbolism, researchers like Stephen LaBerge studied communication from lucid dreams, performing tasks.
Robert Wagner sees it as a gateway to the inner self, showing how mind shapes perception, waking or dreaming.
Yeah, the potential for exploring alternative realities, creativity, therapy. The book shares anecdotes, the feeling of reality in dreams. It's like a limitless playground for consciousness.
Sounds amazing. Does it touch on dream telepathy? Mind to mind in dreams.
Briefly, not usually visual transfer, but maybe picking up thoughts, emotions, shares an example where a dreamer's content matched the sender's focus image somewhat. Suggests a subtle connection, maybe.
And finally, precognitive dreams. Dreams that predict the future. Like Christy Fournier's tsunami dream.
A striking example, detailed dream a year before the actual Indian Ocean tsunami. Science might say coincidence, subconscious processing.
But the impact on the dreamer is huge.
Yeah.
And prophetic claims are ancient. Hard to just dismiss entirely. Okay, so let's bring it back down to earth and talk about the memory-based explanations.
Okay, so the memory-based theories focus on how our normal memory processes might sometimes go a little haywire, leading to déjà vu.
Makes sense. So what are some of the key ideas here?
Well, one important concept is familiarity without recall. That's when you feel like you recognize something, but you can't actually remember where you've encountered it before.
Like a name on the tip of your tongue, but for an entire experience?
Yeah, kind of like that. And it could be that the present situation just subtly resembles something from your past, even if you don't consciously recognize the connection.
Huh. So your brain is making this subconscious link without you even realizing it. What about cryptomnesia? Isn't that like accidental plagiarism?
Exactly. It's when you unconsciously recall a forgotten memory, like something you read in a book, and you mistakenly think it's your own original thought.
Ah, so you get this false sense of familiarity because you've actually encountered the information before, just not in the way you think you have.
Right. It's like your brain is playing a trick on you, making you think something's new when it's actually old.
Sneaky brain.
Yeah.
Okay, what about processing fluency? How does that relate to déjà vu?
Processing fluency is the idea that if your brain can process something easily because you've been exposed to it before, even unconsciously, you might misinterpret that ease of processing as familiarity.
So because it feels familiar to process, you assume you've experienced it before.
Exactly. It's like your brain is saying, hey, this feels effortless. I must have encountered this before.
Okay, and then there's the effective association theory. This one sounds interesting.
This one's all about emotion. It says that the feeling of familiarity in déjà vu might actually come from a misinterpretation of an emotional response.
Wait, so the emotion comes first, and then you get the feeling of familiarity.
That's the idea. Like if something triggers a strong emotion in you, but you can't figure out why, your brain might mistakenly interpret that free-floating emotion as a sense of familiarity.
So it's like the emotion is looking for a place to land, and it attaches itself to the current situation, creating this sense of, I've been here before.
Exactly. It's a really fascinating way to think about it.
It is. So we've talked about all these different theories, but how do researchers actually study déjà vu in the lab? I mean, it's not like you can just make it happen on demand.
No, it's definitely a challenge. It's so spontaneous and unpredictable. But researchers have come up with some clever ways to try and get at the underlying mechanisms.
Oh, like what?
Well, one common method is using word recognition tests, particularly the work of this researcher named Anne Cleary.
Word recognition tests. How does that help us understand déjà vu?
Well, her research suggests that our memories might be stored in these fragmented pieces rather than as whole, complete events.
Interesting. So like a jigsaw puzzle, but the pieces are scattered all over the place.
Exactly. And when we encounter a new situation that contains some of those fragments, it can trigger a feeling of familiarity, even if we don't consciously remember the original event.
Ah, so it's like a partial match in our memory banks, and that's enough to trigger déjà vu. What about those experiments with subliminal priming? I remember reading about those.
Yeah, those are really interesting. Jacoby and Whitehouse, they did these experiments where they flash words on a screen so quickly that people weren't consciously aware of seeing them.
Subliminal messages, basically.
Exactly. And then later, when they showed people a list of words, including some that had been subliminally presented, participants were more likely to say that the subliminally primed words felt old, even though they hadn't consciously seen them before.
Wow. So even unconscious exposure can influence our sense of familiarity.
It seems so. It shows how easily our brains can be manipulated into feeling like we've experienced something when we haven't.
That's both fascinating and a little creepy. What about Alan's ideas about mental fatigue and attention?
Right. He thought that déjà vu might happen when our attention is wavering, and then something suddenly grabs our focus. In that moment, we might mistakenly think we're reliving a past moment when our attention was similarly unfocused.
Ah, so it's like our brain is trying to make sense of this sudden shift in attention and misinterprets it as repetition.
Exactly. And then there's the concept of inattentional blindness, where we miss things that are right in front of us because our attention is elsewhere.
Oh yeah, I've definitely experienced that. Like you're so focused on your phone that you walk right past a friend without seeing them.
Exactly. And some researchers think that maybe we have these brief initial perceptions of things that don't quite reach conscious awareness, but then later when we encounter those things again, they trigger a sense of familiarity, even though we don't consciously remember seeing them before.
So it's like a hidden memory trace that influences our perception. That's really cool.
It is. And interconnectedness as a closing theme. Bohm's implicate order. Zero-point field. A fundamental web linking everything. potentially facilitating time travel, dimensional interaction.
It's all connected, this vast, unseen web, linking things in ways we're just starting to grasp.
And the final analogy, the brain as a biocomputer. Customizable software, beliefs, experiences, network connectivity, interactions, creating each person's unique offline reality.
Our brains as personalized computers, constantly programmed, creating our own version of reality. Wow, what a truly astonishing journey. We have barely scratched the surface of everything about déjà vu.
It's immense, isn't it?
From that personal déjà vu feeling to, well, the nature of reality itself. It's a wild, exhilarating ride for anyone curious about the mind's mysteries.
It really is. It leaves you pondering your own experiences, the fabric of existence.
Absolutely. Makes you revisit those weird moments, déjà vu, vivid dreams, knowing things you shouldn't, and ask, what if? We definitely encourage you, our listeners, check out Déjà Vu Enigma. Dive in yourselves.
It encourages open-mindedness, exploring the boundaries of our understanding. It'll leave you questioning perceptions for sure.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind's enigma, please do us a huge favor, like and subscribe. It really helps us keep exploring these fascinating corners.
We definitely appreciate your support in this ongoing quest.
Okay, and now for that final provocative thought. Considering all these possibilities, how much of our conscious experience is truly ours? And how much might be subtly shaped by unseen orders, interconnected realities, and the vast untapped power within our own minds? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.